Dr. Stephen Walker with the Equine Medical Center, here to talk to you today about parasite control in horses. We've had a pretty fundamental shift in how we recommend that people do that in their horses over the past 10 or 15 years. The most common dewormer that we use is ivermectin. Prior to its invention, the dewormers were not terribly effective. They didn't come in a convenient paste form. Some people still remember tube deworming, where the horse we had to pass a nasogastric tube all the way into the horse's stomach and pump in, 2 or 3 liters, large volumes of liquid that we used to deworm. And that dewormer was not exceptionally effective. A lot of parasites were resistant to it right from the get-go. Because that was such a difficult thing to do and reasonably expensive, because you had to have the vet out to do it, it wasn't done very often. With the invention of ivermectin and in a convenient paste form, it became much cheaper and easier to deworm your horses, so people started using it more often. And a common recommendation would be to deworm your horse every 2 months or 4 times a year. Whether they needed it or not. And for the longest time, we had no resistance to ivermectin, so it really wasn't a problem. There were some very serious parasite diseases of the large strongyles that were a tremendous contributor to colic and other things in horses that were essentially nearly wiped out with the use of ivermectin because their life cycle was so long. But with the continued overuse of ivermectin, we started to see resistance. And it's very similar to what people understand with antibiotic resistance in people. When you expose the parasite to the medicine and it doesn't kill all of them, then you end up with some of them that are resistant. So research has shown that really most horses have a fairly significant level of resistance to parasites just innately. Some exceptions to that are very young horses or very old horses, but by and large, most horses have a fair amount of resistance. But that level of resistance varies from horse to horse. So if we take, I'll use 4 horses for an example here. If we take fecal samples from 4 horses, we'll find that I'm going to represent the parasite eggs with a circle and an X. So we'll find that that some of the horses have a whole lot of parasite eggs, and some of them don't have very many. Now, the most common parasite that we're deworming for is small strongyles. One female small strongyle can produce 10,000 eggs a day. So I have 4 children, and they all look like a Walker kid. They're different, but you can see some similarities between all 4 of them. So the external features of your body are similar if you have similar genetics, but there are differences. The same thing holds for metabolic, your insides and how your metabolism works will be very similar to your parents, but there can be some significant variations. The example I use for that is bee stings. My dad is severely allergic to a bee sting, and we have to take him to the hospital and keep an EpiPen if he gets stung. I can get stung in a yellow jacket's nest with 20 stings. And it annoys me, but it leaves nothing more than a mosquito bite. Same is true with the metabolism of these drugs. So even if the female parasite is not resistant, if she's producing 10,000 eggs a day, just the sheer law of odds are that she's going to produce an egg a day that is resistant to our dewormer. Just metabolically, the dewormer doesn't affect that parasite. And we represented that here by an X. So back with the old recommendation of just randomly deworming every horse in your herd, every 2 or 3 months, we would look at the calendar and we'd say, it's April 1st, and our calendar says that we deworm our horses on April 1st, and we're just going to deworm every one of them. So we're going to use ivermectin because it's the best dewormer we have. And if we deworm all of these horses randomly, let me back up just a minute. So if you're a horse and you're out grazing on this pasture, what is the odds? Let's say that for every X, there are 10,000 O's. So what is the odds that you are going to eat an X if you're out on this pasture? Not great. Just because there's 10,000 O's, you're 10,000 times more likely to eat an O than you are an X. So on April 1st, we decide to deworm our horses, and that dewormer kills every single O. But it does not affect the X's. So now, on April 2nd, our horses are pooping out X's onto the pasture. And if that continues every 2 months, and we continue to kill all the susceptible ones, so after a period of time, you can see that your pasture will become overrun with X's. And then the likelihood of eating an X when you're out grazing becomes much, much higher. So the solution to pollution is dilution. And what we are trying to do is dilute the number of X's out there. We know we really can't stop the development of resistance. And we also know that there's only 4 major classes of dewormers, and there's not likely to be a new one anytime soon. Part of the FDA regulations that we have in this country make it a very long, slow process to get a new drug developed. And if we get to the point where we have a lot of these resistant parasites, we can actually get to the point where our horses die of parasitism and we can't stop it because we can't kill the parasite. So we want to decrease our reliance on chemical means of dewormer. And there's a whole host of non-chemical ways that you can address parasites on your farm, and I would be glad to talk about that in depth on your farm, because it varies from farm to farm on how that would accomplish. But from a chemical basis, we want to use our chemical dewormers as seldom as possible. So what we recommend is a twice-a-year fecal sample from every horse on your place. Research shows, and we've bared that out in years of collecting samples, 20% of the horses on your farm are causing 80% of the problem on your farm. So we need to identify these animals that have very high parasite burdens, and we need to deworm them more frequently, up to 4 times a year. Strategically though, not just spread out randomly. We need to do that at the particular times of the year when the parasite cycle is the most susceptible. And these horses that already have a very high natural resistance, we need to deworm them very seldom, once or twice a year. And then there's horses in the middle that we will do somewhere in the middle. So once we have those fecal samples, we classify your horse as either a low shedder of eggs, or a medium shedder of eggs, or a high shedder of eggs, and then we tailor a deworming protocol to that. We do rotate dewormers for different times of the year, bearing in mind that ivermectin products are still by far the most effective dewormers we have. So in a nutshell, that's our recommendations for deworming. This is all included in our wellness program that we have for horses. That program includes all of the routine preventative medicine things that we think your horse should have every year. So it includes all the vaccines, the float, and all the fecal samples and dewormers included for your horse for the year. So give us a call.